I think it's so important to tell the story because knowing that I was in the position that I was for almost 6 years and worrying and not really knowing what was going on with my daughter, now knowing what I know, I feel like the world needs to know because I'm sure that there's other people out there who are struggling with the same thing. Other parents, other children, other families. They're wondering, why do I have these symptoms? A lot of the doctors are not aware of factor 10 deficiency and the severity or what to look for. And I feel like the word really needs to get out there and people need to know so that they can find help. As I look back over the course of the 6 years where we didn't know that she had factor 10 deficiency, one of the biggest red flags was these swollen ankles that would swell up, and there was so much pain and so much bruising where she would get to the point where she wouldn't even want to walk on it. So we would spend a week or so with her ankle up and icing, but it was very painful and it really, really limited her activity as well as everybody who was caring for her. So when we would do things as a family where she was struggling with ankle pain and that severe bruising we talked about, we would end up having to push her in a stroller all day. You know, she was probably the only 5-year-old in a stroller. Thankfully, she's tiny, but it did limit what we could do. So while the other kids, you know, were running around the hotel pool, if we went somewhere fun like that, it was hard on her because she couldn't do much. She couldn't do that running, you know, up and down the slide or the things that the other kids were doing, or we would be pushing her around in a stroller, or it was the carry me because her ankles were hurting. And the medications we would give her, I mean, Tylenol and Motrin, they don't really do a ton for that. So there was also that frustration where it seemed like nothing we would do would help her. So Hazel had a few other symptoms here and there. She had fallen at school one time and hit her head right on the top of her forehead pretty hard, but it was the biggest egg that anyone had ever seen. It was black and blue. It swelled up several inches out of her forehead, and it was pretty scary looking, but it was one of those things where we kind of just had to let it heal on its own, but it took probably a good couple months for the swelling to actually go down. So it was there for a long time. When we would go in to try to figure out what was going on with her, we ended up with at least 2 casts. So we had one on the arm, one on the leg, several splints for her ankles, wraps, what else? Yeah, I mean, we probably had around 20 different devices put on her to try to make this better. We definitely weren't thinking joint bleeds. When we would go into the doctor for what were joint bleeds, they would almost assume that it was just a severe sprained ankle. And we would do x-rays almost every single time we would do x-rays. So we would go in, do the x-rays. They wouldn't find anything on the x-rays. So we would say, the doctor would say ice, rest, ibuprofen, which now she shouldn't even have ibuprofen. But that was kind of our process. At one point, we did get sent to the orthopedic doctor because, they thought her elbow was broken or maybe her ankle was broken and they just weren't seeing anything because it was such a small fracture. But something in the back of my mind definitely made me think, this is not normal to have these severe sprained ankles randomly. And the thing was every time I would take her into the doctor, I would walk in and they would say, well, what did she do? And my answer was always like, I don't know what she did. I have no idea what she did. So it's amazing, that nothing ever came of that. But I never had any answers, but in the back of my mind, I knew something was up, but we just didn't know what it was. A few times when we had gone into the ER, they did draw blood work, but they were never testing clotting factors. It was everything else under the sun that they would test, and that would all come up normal, which was a relief, so they would send us home. But the clotting factors were never tested. So over the course of about 6 years, we probably spent, I would say, 15 to 20 doctor's visits, and that includes her pediatrician. We spent several times at the ER, so we saw several different ER doctors. The orthopedic doctor that we were sent to, we saw him maybe 3 or 4 times, and then the dentist was finally the one who said, you know what, she could have a bleeding disorder. Hazel had fallen at school one morning, and as she was walking out, and she hit her lip up above in her mouth, and it was bleeding quite a bit. So she came home later that day. It had kind of patched itself up where the bleeding had stopped. We felt okay about it. So we sent her to bed that night. The next morning, she got up and it had been bleeding quite a bit. So I was a little bit concerned. I was worried about her teeth and wanted to make sure she didn't need stitches. So my first plan was to take her into the pediatric dentist. So I took her in there. He took a look at it and said, does she have a bleeding disorder? And I said, no. What's wrong with you? Why on earth would she have a bleeding disorder? So, he cleaned it up, patched it up, all was well. My husband and I took her to my parents' house for the weekend. We had plans to go out of town. And the next morning, my dad called at about 6 a.m. and he said, Hazel's bleeding quite a bit. So we spent the full day at the hospital, ended up being admitted for a couple nights. They did a lot of testing. And that's when the initial test came back that her factor 10 deficiency was extremely low. I would say at the beginning, right when we were diagnosed, I was researching and learning about the intracranial bleeds and the gastrointestinal issues that could happen. And to me, that was a very severe issue that thankfully we hadn't had yet with Hazel, but it was definitely not something I would ever like to experience. But I did learn that Coagadex has an amazing rate at keeping these patients safe from bleeds and, severe bleeds that might happen, especially with Hazel and her issues with bleeding in her joints. That was really severe for her. So I did have a glimpse of hope, knowing that there might be something out there for her that could help stop her issues that she was having. Prophylactic therapy was definitely something that came into play early on with her diagnosis. Because Hazel's deficiency is below 1, the doctors and we felt like it was probably the safest thing for her. There was a lot of worry that was taking place. Once she was diagnosed and we knew she has a very severe bleeding disorder, worrying just comes with the territory for that. So being on the prophylactic 2 times a week with Coagadex has definitely given us peace of mind. We don't have to worry anymore that she's going to, end up with these awful ankle bleeds or anything more severe. So for us, being on Coagadex twice per week was not even, there was no hesitation with that because we knew that she needs to be protected from those things. And that was a no-brainer. As a mom with a child with a bleeding disorder, knowing that she's protected now has been so much better than it was before. It is so reassuring to know that I can send her to school, I can send her to summer camp, and she can be just like the other kids and run and play, and we just don't have to worry nearly as much as we used to. Hazel's level of physical activity before her diagnosis was very limited because she would spend so much time dealing with these aches and pains and joint bleeds. But now that's completely changed. She can go out and ride her bike without any issues. We do let her go on the trampoline just a little bit, but we don't have to worry as much with that. And she's recently started dancing. So she does ballet and tap at a studio near home, and she absolutely loves it. So it's been something physical that she can do without the worries of having joint issues. So she's been on Coagadex for almost a year now, and we have had no symptoms, which is amazing. Before that, we were having symptoms at least once a month, ongoing. Since Hazel was first diagnosed, she's had a very positive reaction to it. I know that for Hazel, it was hard on her to always be in pain with her ankles. She would watch the other kids playing, and she really couldn't participate because she was in so much pain. So I do believe that she had a sense of relief when she found out this is the answer to why you're having all of these problems. I know that she could understand that on some level. So she does understand that she has a bleeding disorder, but she's protected because she has her factor medication and this is what she needs. So she has been extremely receptive to that. She's interested in it. She says that she wants to be a doctor someday for kids with bleeding disorders. And it's something that I think she sees the positivity in a situation that could be really difficult, especially for a child. I would say the whole process of learning how to mix the vials and everything it seemed a bit overwhelming at first, but it really just took me a few times to learn and remember how to do it. And everybody was so patient. So we had the nurses that came to our house and they showed us how to do it step by step. And then we went into the children's hospital to the hematology unit, and they were so patient with showing us the steps after that too. But after, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 times, I pretty much had it down and was ready to go. Over the past year, I have met other families, other moms, parents, kids who do have factor 10 deficiency through the Facebook page, through the Power of 10 support group. And then even through the doctor's offices, they've put us in contact with other people that do have factor 10. They're, few and far between, but it has been nice to come into contact with some people that do understand and are aware of what this experience has looked like for us. To the people who do take the time to donate plasma, we are so incredibly thankful. And we know that it is something that is critical for Hazel. She needs Coagadex, and knowing that there's people who are willing to donate is it's so reassuring and comforting to us. And we just want them to know that we are so thankful for them giving that gift and for them taking their time out of their day to make that sacrifice. It's a huge deal.